moving on from the base structure of the spinal nerve into those rami, we need to look at the ventral rami a little closer. Because the ventral rami are going to have long protrusions coming out to the whole front of the body. But what's unique here is these ventral rami are going to interweave together. They're going to kind of interchange. What this does is it allows for a network that's going to have fibers from several different spinal nerves all coming together. What's unique here also is it's not the thoracic region. This is only up in the cervical region, as well as down the lumbar and sacral region. So we're looking at top and bottom here, not middle where the thoracic is. And inside of this, I already mentioned the fibers are crisscrossing, but what's the benefit of that? Well, in case one of the particular spinal nerves gets pinched or there's an impediment, that information can go into another spinal nerve or come out another spinal nerve. It allows for multiple ways to get information into and out of the central nervous system in the same plexus. Think about New York City. If you're going from point A to point B, how many different ways can you get there? Straight line, sure. Go over a block, go over 2 blocks, go over 3 blocks. The idea is there's multiple pathways if something happens, which is kind of important because if you block off your central nervous system, you have real problems going out from that point. So let's start with the cervical plexus. Now this cervical plexus is going to be the first 4 to 5 cervical spinal nerves. What's happening, you can see, is creating this whole web-like network as it comes out. It's creating this web-like interchanging of all 4 or 5 cervical spinal nerves. This is going to allow innervation of your head, your chest, your anterior chest, your neck and shoulders. It's allowing you to send and receive information from these areas. Now, the most important nerve here, to want to at least keep aware of, is the phrenic nerve. Now, that might ring a bell back from the muscles when we did that. We had muscles that had innervation from the phrenic nerve. The phrenic nerve is going to innervate the what? Innervate the diaphragm. That's why it's so important is all the way up here in the cervical region. That nerve runs down all the way to the diaphragm. So that's also why if someone has a spinal injury that happens in the thoracic region or even the lower cervical, the diaphragm can still function because that phrenic nerve is coming from even higher above, up in the first 4 or 5 cervical vertebrae. We then have the brachial plexus. This is going to be the brachial plexus. Same idea of a web-like extension. But now here, this one's coming from cervical 5 up through thoracic 1. Sometimes you get some cervical 4, sometimes you get some thoracic 2. But the idea is you have a whole, again, grouping of these fibers. Where's it heading? Upper limb. Your arm is being innervated by the brachial plexus. So all these nerves that I mentioned are all going to and from the brachial plexus and the arm, the upper limb. We have the musculocutaneous nerve. Musculocutaneous nerve. It's innervating things like the biceps brachii, brachialis, coracobrachialis. Hopefully those muscles are ringing some bells back from the muscle units. But you also have sensations coming in, which is sensory. So touch sensation on the outside of your lateral arm. So you're having touch sensation. So motor output, sensory input, again, we have a mixture of what's going on here for the musculocutaneous nerve. Median nerve. The median nerve is dealing with intrinsic muscles in the palm. So the 5 different intrinsic, there's 5 different muscles in here. So the ones that are inside the actual palm is the median nerve. As well as sensations coming from your lateral hands, coming from the joints of the hands. So this one's running all the way up the median nerve. Radial nerve. Well, think radial side. It's coming down the radial side, so the lateral side here. The radial nerve is innervating extensors of the upper limb. It's also dealing with sensations from the posterior arm, so think back, posterior arm, as well as down the wrist. And finally, it's also having more sensation coming from the elbow and wrist joints as well as the hand. So think joints, the inside. So if you ever end up spraining something, unfortunately, that feels inside, that's the radial nerve. So motor outputs, extensors, the upper arm, and then sensations laterally down to the hand and the joints. Ulnar nerve. Ulnar comes down on the inside, the medial side of the arm. The ulnar, remember. The ulnar nerve innervates the flexors of the forearm. So anything that's causing flexion of the forearm. So we're doing flexion. So flexors of the anterior forearm as well as the intrinsic hand muscles. So it's creating movements of the flexors there and down to the hand. Sensation-wise, looking at medial hand, so on the inside makes sense, ulna, medial side, as well as some from the joints in your hand. So both the radial and the ulnar are bringing back some things from joints in the hand. All these are still coming from, though, the brachial plexus. So that's C5 to T1 as far as the spinal nerves. Axillary joins the mix. Remember there's the axillary region was the armpit region, going back to the first unit. But the axillary one is innervating deltoid and teres minor. Makes sense, it's the axillary region, the armpit. Deltoid's right there. Teres minor is also right behind it in the shoulder. As well as sensory information coming from the shoulder joint area. So axillary is staying up in the shoulder area itself. So some nerves, some structures from the first two of the plexi, looking at the cervical plexus and the brachial plexus.